For example, about 1989, 1990, this guy named Howard Schultz took a vacation to Italy. And he was working for a coffee company. He was a sales guy at a coffee company, a high-end sales guy at a coffee company. The company did not sell coffee in cups. They only sold ground coffee. And he had worked there and then he left for a while. They had a disagreement. He was thinking that they should put coffee in cups and they didn't believe him. He took this vacation to Italy and he fell in love with the coffee culture of Italy, the espresso culture. And he came back from that trip thinking, like, why are Americans drinking drip coffee? Like, yes, there's this small niche of people who are buying these high-end ground beans from what's called Starbucks back then. He's not the founder. And he said, I'm going to buy the company. I'm just going to buy the company. I'm going to implement basically Italian coffee for Americans. And it had to be tweaked, right? Basically, the biggest product that Starbucks sells is a little bit of espresso and a whole lot of milk. Whereas in Italy, they drink the espresso without the milk, mostly. And it took off, right? So he was right. He was right that this product was in fact desired by enough Americans to make this a big company. It's a humongous company. Similarly, not too many years later, it was about 1994, 95, there was a Wall Street guy. His name was Jeff. And he saw this internet thing popping up. He saw e-commerce. He could see the sigmoid curve of e-commerce, even though it was in the A phase. And he said, I think we'll be in the C phase in a few years. And so what product can I put into the e-commerce channel? What product can I sell on e-commerce that is easy to put in a box, that doesn't go bad sitting on a shelf, that ideally has a lot of choices, some product line where there's so many choices that it's even more efficient to do it online than it is in a physical store? And the answer to his question was books, right? And the answer was books. So he started a bookstore, an e-commerce bookstore called Amazon. And all it did for the first few years was sell books. And then it started to add other products, and now it's humongous. Right now, it's the first or second biggest company in the country, public company in the country. But that's where he was thinking. He was just trying to put together this new trend of internet with some old product that people wanted. Then there's, of course, this guy. He's been a visionary for a long, long time. And in the early 2000s, he had a company that was doing computers and music devices. And we can skip over his brilliant move to do music devices. But then he said, what comes next? And so he was seeing that mobile phones were being popular. We were on the C part of mobile phones in the 2000s. He saw that the smartphones were really clunky and hard to use, but that they would get cheaper and they would become a popular thing if only they were simple enough for everybody to use. And the breakthrough at Apple, which is hard to remember because it was way back in 2007, but the breakthrough of their device versus everyone else's was there were no buttons. There's one button on the bottom and everything else is a touchscreen. Nobody else had done that on a phone before. That was the giant breakthrough. There were no apps in 2007. It wasn't until like late 2008 that there were any apps. It wasn't until 2010 that we had the iPad to go with the iPhone. But he just hit the right timing at the right time by just projecting out all these different trends that were coming together. One more out there. There was a guy in New York City not too long ago. This is, 5-ish years ago. No, a little more than that, 6, 7 years ago. The trend that he saw was the gig economy and the move of independent workers, people who work for themselves, whether they're designers or consultants or whatever. And he just simply asked the question, where are they going to work? And when I did my last software company, I started that company in 2008, before the co-working spaces popped up. In 2008, when I was starting that company, I didn't have an office. I would literally meet in the basement of a coffee shop in Seattle, and I would sit there for like 3 or 4 hours a day, 3 or 4 days a week having meetings. And, I did buy some coffee. Now, I don't drink coffee. I bought a drink. I would eat lunch there. I would pay them for their food, but I would occupy one of their tables for many, many, many hours. And so would others. You'd see other common people in that space. And it wasn't just that coffee shop. I'd meet people at coffee shops all over the city. I got to know where all the coffee shops were and how good their food was and how the ambiance was and whether they were too loud for a meeting and all that. And I would just run around the city with meetings, and that would be my company. And a lot of people did that in the early 2000s and before 2010. And then finally, a bunch of people came up with the idea of a co-working space. And this is not the only co-working space, but this became the biggest co-working space. And then things went wrong with WeWork. And I'll just point out, I answer questions on Quora for a hobby. And I don't remember what year this is the year they went public, which I think was, I guess it's 2019. And so I was answering the question of what went wrong here. This is relevant. I'm not just touting my Quora answer here, which was answered, which was viewed 46,000 times. But the key part when you look at WeWork and what went wrong is that no one actually wrote a business plan for this. Not true. I've seen it. I saw a pitch deck for like Series A or Series B, but no one actually ran the numbers. No one looked at how many people really wanted to work at WeWork, what they were willing to pay, how long they would stay as a customer, because it was a month-to-month membership. They just assumed that they would be on that hockey stick forever. And the numbers that they published to the investors were just bunk. They were just inflated, full of ego and not reality. There was no way they did a research, and the research would not have come up with the numbers that they were touting. But they needed that in order to get the money, and so that worked for them. They raised $11 billion, and they were worth a whole bunch of money when they tried to do an IPO, and it all failed.